Labor Day. For most Americans, it's the final breath of summer. Picnics, camping trips, and long hikes in the wilderness. But for decades, this weekend has carried a much darker legacy inside America's national parks and forests. Follow along as we tell you about these unsolved missing persons cases. In 1981, a family picnicking in the Smoky Mountains left behind their car, food, and belongings. The blanket was still on the ground, half-eaten sandwiches still fresh. But the family themselves were gone, vanished into the trees, never seen again. A chilling missing 4-in-1 style disappearance that still haunts investigators. In 1993, a college student camping with friends in the Rocky Mountains stepped away from his tent after midnight and never returned. Search dogs tracked his scent straight to a cluster of boulders, where the trail ended, as if the earth itself had swallowed him whole. Another disturbing case added to the list of unsolved national park mysteries. And in 2006, a young man hiking alone in Oregon's Mount Hood National Forest texted a friend a photo of the view from the ridge. Perfect spot. Hours later, his backpack was found neatly placed on a rock, but there were no footprints, no trail, no trace of where he'd gone. A terrifying wilderness disappearance that defies explanation. Today, we're diving into 3 of the strangest vanishings and mysterious disappearances in national parks ever recorded. 3 different Labor Day vanishings, 3 different mountain ranges, 3 mysteries that remain unsolved to this day. Coincidence or evidence of something far stranger lurking in the wild? Labor Day, 1981. Families across America were grilling, camping, and enjoying one last taste of summer. But deep in the Smoky Mountains, one family's picnic ended in one of the missing persons cases that has haunted searchers, locals, and investigators for more than 40 years. A car left behind, food and belongings abandoned, and a family that stepped into the woods and was never seen again. The Vanishing Picnic of 1981. Our first story takes us on a family trip to the Great Smoky Mountains. The family was described as an ordinary, happy group. A husband and wife in their 30s, with 2 children under the age of 10. They lived just outside Knoxville, Tennessee, and planned a simple Labor Day picnic inside Great Smoky Mountains National Park. They weren't hardcore hikers, just casual day visitors who wanted to enjoy a mountain stream, some sandwiches, and fresh air before the school year started. The Smoky Mountains are beautiful, but deceptively dangerous. The terrain is dense, humid, and filled with thick underbrush. Even in daylight, trails can vanish in an instant. The Little River area is surrounded by steep ridges, moss-covered boulders, and miles of forest where sound carries strangely. Rangers often say voices echo here, bouncing in ways that confuse direction. By late afternoon, the weather turns slightly overcast, a mist rolling through the valleys. A common occurrence in the Smokies, but one that can disorient even seasoned hikers. They drove into the park mid-morning, witnesses later recalling their green station wagon parked near a picnic area close to the Little River. Other visitors remembered seeing the children wading in the shallow water, laughing and splashing. Everything about the day seemed normal, until it wasn't. Park staff later confirmed the family's vehicle was still sitting in the lot around sundown. The trunk was open, as if they had been interrupted mid-unpacking. A cooler sat inside, but what struck rangers as odd was the blanket, stretched flat on the ground like someone had just been sitting there moments before. Half-eaten sandwiches were left behind, one with a bite so fresh the bread hadn't hardened yet. A soda can was tipped over, dripping slowly into the dirt. But the family was gone. At first, rangers assumed they had wandered off for a quick hike and simply lost track of time. But as darkness crept in, their calls echoed unanswered through the pines. No laughter, no voices, just silence. By morning, when no one returned, a full sweep of the area was launched. That's when the disturbing details began to surface. About 50 yards from the picnic spot, rangers found a child's shoe, tiny and laced neatly, resting upright in the mud as if it had been placed there. Not far from it, a trail of sticky handprints ran along a low boulder, small, frantic smears leading into the tree line. Over the next week, One of the largest coordinated searches in Smoky Mountain history took place. Hundreds of volunteers, rangers, and trained dogs scoured the ridges and riverbanks. Helicopters flew overhead, shining spotlights into the canopy. Deeper in the woods, they discovered something stranger. Pieces of the family's belongings appeared scattered at odd intervals, as though deliberately dropped to lure someone farther inside. A pair of glasses snapped in half. A torn grocery receipt from the same day. The father's wallet, its contents soaked and splayed out, but no cash missing. Then came the blanket, folded neatly again, this time on the forest floor, miles from where the family had been parked. Search dogs were brought in, but each time they neared the ridge, they would stop dead, hackles raised, and whine as though refusing to move forward. Rangers reported hearing faint noises at night, like whispers carried on the wind. Some swore they heard a woman's voice calling for help, though no body was ever found. The most disturbing clue appeared on the third night. Near a creek bed, rangers found the cooler. It hadn't been dragged or torn open by animals. Instead, it was placed upright beside the water. Inside, the sandwiches were gone. In their place was something else. Damp pages torn from a children's coloring book, smeared with mud and what looked like streaks of blood. The family was never seen again. The case remained another unsolved disappearance, and their vehicle was eventually removed. But to this day, hikers who pass through that same trail claim to see flashes of movement in the trees, hear small footsteps pacing just beyond the firelight, and sometimes, if they're unlucky enough to stay after sundown, they find fresh sandwiches waiting for them on the ground, half-eaten. Some suggest the children may have wandered too deep into the river and drowned, with the parents following in a frantic attempt to save them. But the river was shallow that day, and search teams dragged the water repeatedly, finding nothing. Another theory is that the family fell victim to a predator, human or otherwise. The 1980s saw several unsolved crimes in the Appalachians, and some believe a killer may have stalked the family, abducting them. But the lack of struggle or evidence makes this theory weak. The Smokies are home to black bears, but no sign of blood, tracks, or torn belongings were discovered. Experts agree it's highly unlikely that an entire family could be taken silently by animals without leaving behind any trace. Locals whisper about the valleys that take people. Old Cherokee legends speak of spirit voices in the Smokies, luring people away from campfires and into the trees. Hikers have reported hearing children laughing where no one should be. And eerily, several rangers claim that every Labor Day weekend, they receive at least one report of voices in the woods near that same stretch of river. Among paranormal researchers, the vanishing picnic is often compared to so-called time slip cases, where people step into an area of distorted reality. The mist that rolled into the valley that evening has been noted again and again in strange disappearances. Did the family simply walk a few feet into the fog and out of our world? The case was eventually closed, with no answers. The family remains listed as missing, presumed dead. Their names, like so many others lost in America's national parks, are etched into local legend. But here's the chilling part. Hikers still leave flowers near the spot where their blanket was found. Some say, if you sit quietly by the river on Labor Day, you can hear the faint sound of children playing in the water, even when the banks are completely empty. The Smoky Mountains are breathtaking, but they have teeth, and sometimes they don't let go. Labor Day weekend, 2006. Thousands of hikers and campers filled Oregon's Mount Hood National Forest for one last summer adventure. Among them was a young man seeking solitude and fresh air. He texted a friend a picture from the trail around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a breathtaking view of the mountains. That was the last sign of him. Hours later, searchers found his backpack sitting neatly on a rock, but no footprints, no trail, no trace of where he went. This is the creepy, unexplained disappearance of the Labor Day hiker who vanished on Mount Hood, leaving behind only a single photograph and one of the most baffling missing persons mysteries in Oregon's history. The man was 29 years old, active, and familiar with the outdoors, though not considered an expert. He worked in Portland and often used the forest as his escape from the stress of city life. Friends described him as adventurous, but careful, someone who loved the outdoors but didn't take unnecessary risks. That Labor Day weekend, he drove alone into Mount Hood National Forest for a simple day hike. His plan was short: a popular trail, some photography, and back home before dark. Mount Hood is a striking peak that dominates Oregon's skyline. The surrounding forest is a vast wilderness of old-growth evergreens, mossy ridges, volcanic rock, and deep ravines carved by streams. Trails here vary. Some are wide and well-traveled, others vanish into tangled brush. The forest is known for sudden weather changes. Clear skies can turn into dense fog within minutes, and once the mist rolls in, distances blur, sounds distort, and orientation is lost. On that weekend, the weather was mild but shifting. Cloud cover was reported in the higher elevations, with cooler winds sweeping down the slopes. At 2:07 p.m., he sent a text to a close friend with a photo attached. The image showed a wide valley below Mount Hood, framed by tall trees, the sky still partly sunny. His message was brief, casual, almost cheerful. Made it to the ridge, perfect view. That was the last anyone ever heard from him. When he didn't return home by nightfall, friends weren't immediately alarmed. He was an experienced hiker, often impulsive, sometimes prone to spending an extra night outdoors if the weather was good. They assumed he had decided to camp under the stars. But the next morning, when his car was still sitting at the trailhead, keys gone, backpack gone, but a thermos of coffee half drained in the cup holder, concern mounted. Rangers were alerted. What they found over the following days was far more unsettling than a simple disappearance. The search for the missing hiker began immediately. Dozens of volunteers, rescue dogs, and helicopters were deployed. Teams used the timestamp and angle of his photo to triangulate the likely ridge where he had stood. The trail was straightforward at first. Tracks confirmed he had reached the ridge where the photo was taken. Investigators hiked to the same spot, compared the view, and saw the unmistakable alignment of trees and valley. Nothing unusual. But just past the ridge, the signs began to shift. His boot prints wandered from the main path into the undergrowth, almost as though he had been following something or someone. The impressions grew erratic, stopping, circling, then starting again, and then the trail simply stopped, not faded, not washed out. It ended abruptly, in the middle of a patch of pine needles, as though he had taken one more step and then ceased to exist. That night, while combing the area with headlamps, rangers found something 10 yards from where his tracks ended: his phone. It was face down in the dirt, screen cracked, but still powered on. Oddly, the text history showed something chilling: unsent drafts. At least 3 of them, all time-stamped minutes after the photo had been sent. The messages were garbled, half-typed words that made little sense. Not alone, can't breathe right, behind me. None were sent. They simply sat in his drafts folder, frozen in time. The following morning, a search team discovered his jacket dangling from a tree branch nearly 12 feet off the ground. It hadn't been torn by animals. It was neatly placed, sleeves swaying like a scarecrow. Further downhill, near a small creek, they found his water bottle. Inside wasn't water, but a strange black sludge, smelling faintly metallic. Testing later showed nothing conclusive, just organic matter that didn't belong there. And then there was the second phone. He only owned one, according to friends, but rangers found another device buried shallowly in the soil near a rotting log. Same model, same case, but when they powered it on, the gallery contained only one photo, a blurry shot of a man's silhouette standing among the trees. No face, no details, just the outline of someone or something watching. The timestamp read 2:13 p.m., 6 minutes after his last text. On the 4th day, at the base of a cliff several miles off trail, searchers found his backpack. It wasn't damaged, not dragged or torn, but everything inside had been wrong. The food was still there, but half-eaten, as if someone else had shared it. His journal contained only one entry, scrawled hastily in handwriting that grew increasingly shaky. Something is moving between the trees. It watches. I don't think it wants me to leave. If anyone finds this, don't follow the voices. The last page was torn out. It was never found. But here's where it gets strange. No footprints led away from the rock. No broken branches. No disturbed dirt. It was as if he had placed his backpack down and simply vanished. The scent dogs tracked his trail from the parking lot to the ridge, circled the rock several times, and then stopped, sitting down as if confused. For 10 days, searchers combed every ravine, every thicket, every stretch of the trail system. Nothing. No torn clothing, no signs of injury, no wildlife activity. By the second week, authorities declared the search suspended. Some believe he may have fallen into one of Mount Hood's deep ravines. The forest hides countless drop-offs, masked by brush, and honestly, a fall could easily have concealed his body from searchers. But repeated searches with ropes, drones, and helicopters never located a single clue. Could he have been attacked by cougars or black bears? Wildlife experts say it's unlikely. Predators leave tracks, drag marks, and evidence, none of which were found. Some speculate he staged his own vanishing, just walking away from his life. But if so, why leave his backpack? Why abandon food, water, and supplies? And more importantly, why in such a remote, difficult place? Mount Hood National Forest has long been tied to strange disappearances and native folklore. Some tribes speak of spirit guardians who protect the mountains, luring intruders away. Others tell of shadow walkers, beings that stalk travelers and lead them off the path. Hikers in the same area have reported unsettling phenomena, hearing footsteps following them, though no one was there. Sudden silences in the forest, as if the wildlife had just vanished, a heavy sense of being watched. The most unsettling theory is that he may have stepped into something not of this world. His last known location was marked by fog drifting through the trees. Paranormal researchers point out that many disappearances in Mount Hood occur during these sudden shifts in weather, as if the mountain itself opens and swallows those who stray too far. To this day, no trace of the Labor Day hiker has been recovered. His family still leaves flowers at the trailhead every September, a haunting reminder that, well, the forest does not always give back what it takes. The unanswered questions echo louder than the silence. Why was his backpack set so neatly on the rock? Why no footprints, no evidence, no trail leading away? The truth may be buried in the ridges of Mount Hood, or perhaps it slipped away into something far stranger than we can imagine. Either way, the forest keeps its secrets, and the mountain is still watching. Labor Day weekend, 1993. A group of college friends camped deep in Colorado's Rocky Mountains. They laughed, cooked over a fire, and watched the stars above the high peaks. But in the middle of the night, one of them left the tent and never came back. His friends searched until dawn, convinced he'd simply gotten lost in the dark. But when rescuers arrived, they discovered something far stranger. The scent dogs circled the campsite again and again before leading them to a cluster of boulders and stopping. The trail ended there, as if the earth itself had swallowed him whole. This is the creepy disappearance of the missing camper in Colorado's Rocky Mountains. The group consisted of 5 college friends from Denver University, with ages ranging from 19 to 22. They had spent the summer hiking and exploring together and, wanted one last adventure before classes resumed in September. Their plan was simple: a 3-day camping trip in the Rockies over Labor Day. They drove into the wilderness near Estes Park, packed with tents, sleeping bags, and enough food for the weekend. None of them were experts, but they were familiar with the outdoors and felt pretty confident in their abilities. The missing camper, let's call him David, was 20 years old, a quiet but well-liked student. Friends described him as level-headed, never reckless. He was not the type to wander off without telling someone. The Rocky Mountains are honestly breathtaking, but they're also treacherous. Jagged peaks rise thousands of feet, forests stretch for miles, and hidden caves dot the slopes. The weather can shift in an instant, from warm and clear skies to sudden snow flurries, even in early September. The group's campsite was set in a meadow near a tree line, with large granite boulders scattered across the area like giant tombstones. At night, the forest grew unnervingly silent. So quiet, some of the campers later admitted they felt uneasy even before the disappearance. It was Sunday, September 5th, the second night of their trip. The group of friends had settled around the fire after a long day of hiking. The meadow was quiet, the tree line casting black silhouettes against a sky dusted with stars. They roasted the last of their marshmallows, traded stories, and laughed until the fire burned low. Close to midnight, David stood up, brushing ash from his jeans. "I'm going to hit the bathroom," he said, grabbing the small flashlight he kept clipped to his backpack. He wandered into the dark, the beam bobbing as he moved toward the trees. Minutes passed, then an hour. His friends noticed the fire had dwindled, but David hadn't returned. They called his name into the night. No response. They grabbed their own flashlights, fanning out around the meadow. The beams cut through the dark, sweeping over the grass, the tree trunks, the brush. Nothing. The flashlight he carried had disappeared into the void with him. By dawn, panic replaced curiosity. The friends hiked to the nearest ranger station, faces pale, voices shaking, to report him missing. Within hours, a large-scale search was underway. Rangers, scent dogs, and helicopters swept the wilderness. At first, the dogs did exactly what they were trained to do. They caught David's scent, leading handlers from the campsite into the tree line. The friends felt a surge of relief, but then, something bizarre happened. The dogs slowed, circled, and whined. They pulled their handlers not deeper into the woods, but back toward the campsite, over and over again, as though David had never left. And then, all at once, they made a beeline for a cluster of boulders just beyond the meadow. The dogs scratched frantically at the stone, noses pressed against the rock, whimpering. Handlers examined the area carefully. No cracks, no caves, no crevices wide enough for a man to slip through. And yet the dogs insisted. The scent stopped dead at the stone, as though David had walked directly into it. The trail ended there. As the search expanded outward, ravines, streams, ridges, theories piled up. Some said David had wandered too far, fallen, and was hidden beneath brush. Others whispered about animal attacks. But those theories unraveled when the search teams found the first clue. On the third day, a volunteer discovered David's flashlight. It was wedged upright into the dirt, its beam still faintly glowing, though the batteries should have been long dead. The lens was cracked, the bulb buzzing, but it hadn't gone out. 10 yards away, tucked beneath a tree root, lay his wristwatch. The glass face had been shattered inward, as though something had pressed violently against it. Even stranger, his watch was still ticking, hours behind, but steady. The most chilling find came on the 7th day. On the far side of the meadow, searchers stumbled across a pair of his shoelaces. Not the shoes, just the laces, tied neatly together and laid across a flat stone like some kind of offering. No sign of struggle, no blood, no reason for him to have removed them. As days passed, searchers began to notice strange things around camp. At night, rangers reported hearing movement just outside the firelight. Slow, deliberate pacing that stopped the moment they shone their beams into the dark. One handler swore he heard David's voice call his name from the tree line. When he ran toward the sound, he found nothing except a stack of small stones balanced unnaturally high, teetering in the wind. Another searcher reported waking to find her compass needle spinning erratically, even though the sky above was clear. Her radio crackled with static each time she neared the boulder cluster where the dogs had stopped. On the 10th day, one ranger swore he saw a figure crouched between the rocks just at dusk. Too tall, too thin, watching silently. He turned away thinking it was nothing. He looked back, and this time it was gone. Despite flyers, helicopters, volunteers on horseback, despite 10 days of exhaustive searching, no body was ever recovered. No backpack, no clothing, not even bones. The case remains unsolved. Locals now call the site the Vanishing Rocks. Campers avoid the meadow entirely, claiming the place feels wrong after sundown. Some say the stones are older than the forest itself, that they hum faintly if you press your ear against them. Hikers passing through sometimes report seeing a pale light moving between the trees, a flashlight beam, too small to belong to the search parties, too steady to be mistaken for starlight. Those who have stayed long enough swear they hear a voice in the night, distant but clear, echoing the last words David ever spoke to his friends. "I'm just going to the bathroom." And then nothing, only silence. Some believe David may have fallen into a hidden crevice or cave. The Rockies are riddled with unstable ground, and a fall could conceal a body forever. But the search team found no sign of disturbed rock or hidden shafts near the campsite. Could a cougar or bear have taken him silently? Rangers say unlikely. There were no drag marks, no blood, and no torn belongings. Predators leave evidence. Investigators briefly considered whether David had chosen to vanish. But his wallet, keys, and belongings were still inside the tent. Friends insisted he was not depressed or planning to leave his life behind. Here's where things get chilling. Local folklore speaks of stone doorways in the Rockies, places where the earth itself opens, swallowing the unlucky. Native Ute legends tell of spirit caves that pull people into another realm. Some hikers have reported feeling vibrations or hearing faint voices near certain boulder fields. In fact, during the search, several volunteers later admitted they felt an electric hum near the boulders where David's trail ended. Others claimed they heard whispers on the wind, though no one was nearby. Some believe David stumbled into something beyond explanation, whether a dimensional rift, a time slip, or a phenomenon tied to the geology of the mountains. The dogs' behavior only fuels this theory. They weren't confused by scent loss. They acted as if his trail literally ended at the stone. To this day, David's case remains unsolved. His family holds memorials each Labor Day, leaving flowers at the base of the mountains where he vanished. For them, the Rockies are no longer a place of beauty, but of loss. The Rocky Mountains are filled with legends, some of ancient spirits, some of strange disappearances that defy explanation, and every now and then, the land itself seems to take someone, leaving behind only silence and stone. If you ever find yourself camping among the boulders of the Rockies, remember this. You might be at the same place where someone had just vanished without a trace. If you like our stories, please hit subscribe so you can be notified when a new one comes out. We post weekly. Thanks for watching.